You install a doorbell camera because you're tired of packages disappearing off your porch. And within a week, you've built a permanent recording device that also captures your neighbor's front window, the conversation two people had on the sidewalk at 8 p.m., and every dog walker who passes your house on a loop. None of that was the plan. It's just what the device does by default, because the company that made it optimized for catching the package thief, not for minimizing what else gets swept up along the way. I test what consumer privacy and security tools actually do under the hood, not what the marketing page claims. And doorbells are a good example of a product that gets talked about in vague, scary terms online when the mechanics are well documented if you go looking. This is the voiceover version of an article on the site. Same order, same conclusions, just read out loud so you can have it on while you're doing something else. Do what the camera actually captures, because this is the part most people never think through after the install. A doorbell camera sits at door height with a wide-angle lens, deliberately wide. The company that made it wants to catch a porch pirate standing off to the side of the frame, not just someone dead center on your welcome mat, so the field of view routinely spills past your property line. That means sidewalk traffic, parked cars, a slice of the house across the street, sometimes a neighbor's yard, or even their window, depending on the angle of your porch relative to theirs. You bought a camera to watch your door. What you actually deployed is a camera that watches a chunk of the block. Audio is the part people consistently underestimate. Most of these devices record sound automatically whenever the video triggers, and a decent microphone on a quiet street can pick up a normal conversation well past your doorstep, sometimes across the street, sometimes in a neighbor's yard, depending on ambient noise that night. Recording a conversation without the consent of the people in it is regulated more tightly than video in a lot of places, which is exactly why some manufacturers ship the audio toggle off by default in certain regions. That's a compliance decision the company made because of local law, not proof that your specific unit, wherever you live, has audio disabled. Go check the setting yourself, don't assume. Now follow the footage after it's recorded, because this is where the real exposure lives, more than the camera itself. The clip doesn't sit on the doorbell. It gets pushed to the manufacturer's cloud within seconds, so you can open the app from your office and see who rang the bell 20 minutes ago. That's the entire selling point of the product. But the moment that upload happens, the footage stops being something sitting on a device bolted to your wall and becomes data on someone else's server, governed by that company's retention policy, terms of service, and incident response if their systems ever get breached. Retention windows aren't a fixed number, and people often assume there's an industry standard when there isn't. A free tier might give you a rolling few days of storage before clips age out and get deleted automatically. A paid subscription tier on the same device might hold that same footage for 60 days or more. Some devices support local storage instead, an SD card slot or a home hub that keeps the recording physically in your house and never touches a third-party server. Local storage is almost always the less convenient option. It's opt-in. It usually means no easy remote viewing, so most people never switch and just stay on whatever the cloud default was when they set up the app. The number for your device is sitting in a settings menu you've probably never opened. It's worth 5 minutes to go read it. Now let's get into who can actually request that footage, because a lot of the anxiety people have about these devices gets muddled into one vague fear when it's really 3 separate paths with 3 different rules. The first path is just you, the account holder. You can pull your own footage, download it, share it with whoever you want, hand it to a neighbor, post it online. That's the intended use of the product, and there's no legal process involved because it's your account and your data to move around as you see fit. The second path is law enforcement going through the front door, meaning a warrant or a subpoena served directly on the manufacturer that compels the company to hand over stored footage regardless of whether you, the homeowner, want to cooperate. This isn't unique to doorbells, by the way. It's the same basic mechanism your email provider or your phone carrier operates under when they receive a valid legal request for account data. Some manufacturers publish a transparency report that breaks down how many of these requests came in over a given period, and how many the company complied with. And if that number matters to you, that report is public and worth reading for the specific brand you own. The third path is different from both of those, and it's the one that tends to surprise people most when they first hear about it. Several doorbell platforms built a feature that lets police request footage directly from device owners in a given area, sometimes through an in-app prompt, sometimes through a separate partner portal the company set up for this. No warrants required for that ask, because it's framed as a voluntary request to you, the owner, not a compelled legal demand on the company. You can typically decline it. A few platforms have scaled this feature back or restructured how it works over the years after public criticism. Ring's public-facing police request tool being the most widely reported example. So the exact mechanics genuinely depend on the current version of the product sitting on your wall right now, not on some general rule that applies to the whole category forever. If this is a feature you care about, check your app's current policy instead of going off a news story from a few years back. And here's the point that ties those three paths together, because it's easy to walk away from a list like that thinking there's some clever setting that gets you out of all of it. There isn't. None of this means the footage is untraceable, or that flipping a setting makes a legal request disappear. A warrant compels the company to produce what it has, full stop. Regardless of how you've configured your activity zones or your audio toggle, the settings we're about to walk through change what gets recorded in the first place. They don't change what happens to a recording that already exists once a court is involved. Now flip the whole thing around, because a lot of people listening aren't the one who owns the doorbell, they're the one walking past it every day on the way to their car. If you're on that side of it, your options are genuinely limited, and they're mostly local, meaning a conversation with an actual human rather than a technical fix. If a neighbor's camera is angled to capture your window or your backyard rather than just the shared sidewalk between your properties, you can ask them directly to adjust it. Most people will, honestly, because they didn't think about the angle either. Whether a privately owned camera pointed partly onto a neighbor's property is actually restricted where you live is a real legal question, and it depends entirely on your local jurisdiction. So that's genuinely something for a local attorney to answer for your situation, rather than something a general explainer can resolve. What does seem to hold up fairly consistently across different places is that footage of you walking down a public street captured by a device the property owner controls gets treated very differently under the law than footage of you through your own window. That distinction, public space versus private space, tends to be the hinge point in most of these conversations. Okay, so what's actually worth doing if you're the one with the camera? Start with the field of view and the activity zone setting inside the app. Almost every one of these devices lets you draw a digital boundary, so the camera only triggers and records within roughly your own property line instead of the entire visible street. That one setting probably does more to reduce how much of your neighbor's daily life you're incidentally storing than anything else on this list, and it takes about 90 seconds to set up. Next, find the audio recording toggle if your model has one, and make an actual decision instead of leaving whatever the factory default happened to be. Some people want audio because it catches a threat making verbal contact at the door. Some people would rather not record ambient conversation on the sidewalk. Either answer is fine, just make it a real choice. En Jennifer when möchte bitte nur handlens, if your device supports local storage through an SD card or a home hub, weigh that seriously against the cloud default. Local storage keeps the footage physically in your house and off a third-party server entirely, which is a real reduction in exposure. The trade-off is that if the device itself gets stolen or destroyed, which does happen, you lose the footage with it, since there's no off-site backup in the cloud account. It's a real trade-off either direction, not a free upgrade. Set your retention window to the shortest length that still serves the reason you bought the camera in the first place. If you're worried about package theft, you probably need enough days to notice a missing delivery and pull the clip before it ages out. Not 60 days of rolling footage sitting there for no operational reason. Shorter retention is just less data sitting around waiting to matter to somebody someday. And check the sharing and neighbor network settings specifically, because a few of these platforms surface your clips to other users nearby by default, sometimes as a way to help identify a package thief working the whole block. That might be exactly what you want. It might also be something you didn't realize was switched on. Either way, it's worth knowing which one it is for your account. Fiverr's list. So here's the realistic version of the threat model, without the fear selling and without pretending there's a magic setting that solves it completely. For almost everyone who owns one of these, the real risk in front of you isn't a courtroom fight over a warrant. It's the quieter, everyday stuff. A field of view wider than it needs to be. Audio picking up conversations nobody involved agreed to have recorded. And footage sitting on a cloud server under a retention policy you never actually read when you set up the app. Tightening the activity zone, making a real decision on audio, and picking a retention window that matches your actual reason for owning the thing addresses that exposure directly and immediately. What it doesn't do is make the footage vanish if a legal request shows up at the company's door. No setting on the device does that, and anyone telling you otherwise is selling you something. What these adjustments actually do is make sure the camera is doing the job you bought it for, watching your porch, instead of quietly doing a much bigger job you never signed up for. If you want the full breakdown with screenshots of exactly where these settings live on the major platforms, along with honest tool tests and step-by-step guides that tell you what a thing actually protects you from and what it doesn't, that's what the site is for. You can find the full guides and tool tests at theprivacywire.com. And if this was useful, go ahead and subscribe for the next one.